Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got my normal cast of crew. Got Harvey Green with me from XenTegra. Harvey, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
How's life in the basement?
Low light, conditions just right.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. It really does. I never see anything above the upper half of your head or your body, so I don't know. There might be stuff laying all over the floor in there. Who knows?
There is not, thankfully.
Good. You want to have consultants and engineers that are very organized.
Absolutely.
We've got with us from the IGEL side, Chris Feeney. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank goodness for virtual backgrounds, although I did do some cleanup in the office over the weekend. But it's going well. Looking forward to today's, what's that?
Do you have a green screen or are you just letting it do it natively there?
No green screen. Not yet. I probably could hang up something there to do that, but it seems to be holding fine. Although when I, put the mug up front, it's always that invisible thing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. We also have Seb with us. Seb, let's tell the audience what you just told us. You're in your car because you're having construction done inside your house. And so, the show must go on. So Seb's hanging out in his car doing the podcast with us. How's it going?
That's exactly true. Thank you for asking. I'm doing pretty fine. We have an exciting day today. I mean, first the podcast with you guys, and then a little bit later on, meet up with Jed Iris, our main guy of IGEL, sitting together with us and speaking with the IGEL insiders and VIP group. So exciting day.
Have you guys called Jed yet to make sure he's up?
I would think he's always up, even doing nighttime, but
it's QBR week. Yeah, it's QBR week. So he may be early riser this week.
Well, no, he's an early riser all the time. I talk to him every week, text or in person, and I get messages from him at 4 o'clock in the morning my time. He's in San Francisco. I'm like, what are you doing up at 4 o'clock Eastern? He's like, well, I got to be up when the Germans are up. Like, man, that guy is anytime my wife gives me a hard time about working too much, I'll just talk to her about Jed and say it could be worse. That man's a working machine.
That's true.
And for those of you who don't know, we're talking about the CEO of IGEL, Jed Ayers, who's based out in California, but works German time, seems like, and West Coast time. Well, guys, let's jump into today's blog that we're reviewing. Today, we are talking about, and I'm going to make a joke here, the exciting subject of deploying custom partitions, which if you're an IGEL guy and you're doing anything super advanced, at some point you are going to probably have to deploy a custom partition, and you're going to have to deploy it to your remote users through the IGEL Gateway. Therefore, we thought this would be a good topic. So, Chris, you want to just kind of set us up here and talk about why this is such an important piece of the IGEL technology story?
Yeah, that's a great segue. So first of all, right, obviously, for those that may be, not as experienced with IGEL, IGEL is a read-only operating system, and we have various things already built in, Citrix clients, Horizon clients, WVD, stuff like that we update on a regular basis. But then you have certain scenarios where applications that can be installed on Linux are not already baked in, and so the mechanism to make that work in an operating system where we basically remove the ability to install anything you want is through custom partitions. And there's a best practice for how to actually do that. And so in my time at IGEL, now coming up on 3 years on May 1st, essentially, a lot of information has come out. And so what we have today is a blog kind of talking about this IGEL Community GitHub repository, which is, I guess, another name you might call it, is a custom partition store, though it's not, it's kind of been referred to. But the point is, we have a place that is maintained, and I know my colleague Ron Nair has done a great job of sort of latching onto that. He's got a tremendous skill set programmer wise, and today's blog talks about this place in GitHub where you have all the information you need to build a custom partition manually, but you also have a little script that can do it in just a short amount of time, like less than a minute. So we'll talk about that as we get going here.
So Chris, we should probably stop and give give just deserves to Barry Browne. Barry is part of the IGEL community, a member of the year. I think it looks like here in 2020. I think this blog was actually written by Barry, correct?
Very correct. Yeah, he went through it, just like anybody should. You go through. Ron had posted sort of a video out there on LinkedIn. I think Jed actually retweeted it or whatever the LinkedIn version of that is, sharing, and went through this whole set of instructions. I've done it myself, so I can validate that what Barry wrote as far as the procedure works really well. And then it's just a matter of getting that up to a place where now you can remotely push it out for devices that are coming in through an ICG.
And before we jump too far into it, we should also talk about this kind of maybe somewhat goes hand in hand with the idea of how to push out the IGEL OS updates, which looks like Barry had a blog on that earlier prior to this one, which I think maybe there's some updates coming to that. I think we kind of hinted to it last week or last podcast. But Seb, is there anything before we jump into the guts and the details of this one that you want to kind of highlight around custom partitions and pushing those out?
I mean, I would split my answer in two sections. Yes, definitely. On the first hand, just to add a few comments on what Chris already mentioned, the operating system itself, when it was started, can get more or less any kind of feature sets. But as soon as you will deploy bigger files through ICG, that's where the protocol we are using by deploying standard proof files, which are a few kilobytes in general, gets to a limitation. So deploying custom partition like Teams, I would have to lie, but something between 400 and 600 megabytes, as soon as it is extracted, would definitely kill the deployment process. So that's the reason why Barry wrote that blog, how to deploy files to an endpoint which is outside of your company, like a teleworker, etc. And that's one of the limitations that we have in ICG. We cannot deploy bigger files at the moment. That's the first thing. The second thing, just to be clear, besides the fact that we are a read-only operating system, which is to 100% true, I would just wanted to add that sometimes we have a legal perspective to look at, and sometimes we are not allowed to distribute a specific tool, a specific application like Microsoft Teams because of legal stuff, because we would redistribute a software where we are not the owner, and that can be a tricky part. And that's where the custom partition topic is getting a little bit complicated from a legal perspective. Just my 5 cents on that topic.
And guys, let's tie this into what this really is. This is all about taking the Linux operating system from IGEL and adding extra functionality to it beyond what's built into it, which if you're just connecting to a remoting system like a Citrix and you're doing Teams offloading or something, that's all built in there. This is when you want to take the functionality of the operating system further. And as Seb was just pointing out, there's things that IGEL can't put into the operating system for various reasons, whether it's size or bloat or legal reasons why they can't put it in there. But this is your way to take any type of Linux package, more or less, and make it available to IGEL through a custom partition. Harvey, is that a good way to explain what this custom partition world is all about?
It is. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think really the key thing here is kind of going back to Barry's, three points in the article. The third one is really dealing with the world that we're living in now, right? I mean, Seb's in a car, Harvey's in a basement. I'm second floor of my house, right? We're all remote somewhere, and we have devices that are under management, and you still need to be able to update them. And so they just need an internet connection and a place where they can grab that. You don't want to be pushing these files through the ICG itself. You would rather have them go somewhere that's accessible anywhere in the world, essentially. And so in this case, he's referring to an Amazon S3 bucket, which is a great place, but sort of pulling back for a second, best practice, right? You're going to build out an IGEL and manage an IGEL environment. You've got your management server somewhere in the world. You've got ICGs to manage those devices remotely, and you need a place to be able to update them from a remote repository where you can put all kinds of things. You can put your wallpapers, you can put your custom partitions, you can put your IGEL OS updates. And in this case, he's using S3, although it could be Azure Blob, it could be a variety of places. So that's sort of setting the stage, and now probably I think is a good time to dig into the meat of how this works.
Well, and just to make sure we got the point across, your universal management server, right? That's the one controlling this process. It's being accessed through the IGEL Cloud Gateway. You could technically push out the custom partition through that solution. It would just create a bottleneck and possibly bring it to its knees. What you guys are highlighting here is, yes, control it through the UMS, access the control through the IGEL Cloud Gateway, but then point them to somewhere publicly accessible, probably in a read-only fashion, so that you can pull down the big data dump from somewhere outside of your environment, nice and safe, but
Correct.
controlled and
Exactly.
non-problematic way.
Yeah. The nice thing is there's lots of options out there. So
Yeah. All right. Well, how do we want to proceed from the blog over to the write-up that was done and hosted out on the IGEL site here?
So I think a couple things. I would say, the title of the blog is Deploy IGEL Custom Partitions via IGEL Cloud Gateway. If you're on the community site, igelcommunity.com, for example, just go to the blog section. You should be able to. There's a reference to the IGEL Community GitHub repository. There's a link there. So if you're not familiar with that, it's if you just go to GitHub, look up IGEL Community. There's links also on the IGEL Community. So that is a place if you're following along as we go. And then one of the best practices that Ron kind of helps out with on that custom partitions page that's there on the screen there, if you click, there's a, because IGEL is built off of an Ubuntu-based version of Linux, essentially, the best practice is make that build box that Barry references here, using the LTS, basically the version that we're using, which would be 1804. If you go with 2004, there might be some things there that would work, but I would just stick with 1804 as your base build box. And Ron references sort of how to build that. And then basically what I've done is I've built a virtual machine, get this updated to you're ready to start building CPs, and then snapshot it, and you can always revert back to it. So that's sort of step number one, get that foundation ready to go.
And Chris, if you build it on 1804, it's going to work for newer versions as well, more than likely.
Right. I mean, 1804 is just trying to match, like for like. IGEL, I think it was 1104 is when we sort of made the leap from the base at 1604 Ubuntu to 1804. So that's kind of what that is. And at some point, maybe next year, maybe it's OS 12 or whatever is built off of 2004, whatever. But right now, 1804 would be your, just best practice. Go with that.
Okay.
I would definitely recommend to test them. I mean, even if you are migrating from a 1104 to 1105 phone, a major release, inside of a major release version, I'm always trying, if it's really a business critical application, like sometimes Teams is in a teleworker situation, I'm always trying to convince my customer to test every custom partition on every firmware, for the simple reason that that's what Chris will cover in a few seconds, I guess. But for an application like Teams, we are building a kind of portable version of that application. And if there is already a library or a file that is existing in our operating system, it will not get redeployed. So we are assuming that we have a specific base of files inside of our operating system. And from time to time, we are changing stuff inside the operating system too. So if we remove a specific library from our operating system, it might fail by starting the application like Microsoft Teams. So if you have a custom application and you're planning to update your IGEL operating system, I would highly recommend to test it deeply, just to be sure that every function is given after the update. Just wanted to share that one because some customers are complaining that the custom partition worked on 1104, or 1104-100 and was not working anymore on 247, like an example.
Yeah. Okay.
So which kind of takes us to the disclaimer on any custom partition. I'm not going to read it for you, but it's out there. This is really IGEL offers basically zero support on this, right? I mean, I'm not, the actual language is out there, but just this is definitely, a feature that works and has been used quite well over the years. But there's a disclaimer, so make sure you read it. No guarantees, but what we've got here on the GitHub site is really a really nice way that Ron's kind of put all this together to make sure that when you are building a custom partition for an application, one of the key things is obviously making sure what additional libraries are needed in order to make that run well on IGEL. And that's probably one of the biggest things. If you've been trying to do these manually, it doesn't matter what application it might be. It could be a VPN client or something. Ron does a really nice job with this GitHub site to sort of show you, hey, these additional libraries are needed. And then the script that we're going to be going through here to actually build this does a nice job. It pulls those libraries out, pulls them all together, and then begins the process of building out the CP and then zipping it all up so it's ready to be installed on the operating system when it's done.
And Chris, help me understand what we're looking at here. Are we looking at the source files needed to build the custom partition? Are we looking at source files and the information and custom partitions that can just be downloaded and tried?
Yeah, so great point. So what he's got here, a couple things, right? So he's got a profile that's been built. The one thing that we cannot distribute, as Seb referred to before, is the actual application itself. And so, but this there's a couple spots here like firmwares or the actual profile where you can say, all right, here's what that profile would look like, but I still have to go and sort of get that package built. Now the source file here, if you click on CP source there on the screen, this is where you will see, all right, what am I looking at here? So let's go with unified communications there at the bottom, and that should take us to Microsoft Teams right there, third one. And the script that you would be downloading would be the build Teams CP SH. If you click on that, Barry refers to this in his article, there is the actual script that you can run on the Linux build box. And so the best practice here, if you see the raw button up there in the corner, if you click that, and this URL up top, you can just copy that URL. And then when we get into the meat of the blog post, you'll be on the Ubuntu box. You're ready to go. You basically go to a terminal line, and you can do the wget command and paste that URL, and it pulls down this script. And then all you have to do at that point is just make sure it's an executable, and then run it. And then it'll start going through everything you see here on the screen. It'll go out to the Microsoft Teams site, pull down the latest version of Teams, and then look for any additional libraries that are needed, kind of find what those are, and then begins the process of building it here. So I don't want to get too far ahead because there's a lot of really good stuff here.
Chris, I think what we're really highlighting here is IGEL can't package up and distribute Teams. That would be illegal, but they can point you to where you need to go to do it within your own organization, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. And again, I want to highlight for the group, I don't know how I don't know how experienced some of the listeners are. We're not talking about doing Teams offload for like a Citrix or VMware environment. We're talking about actually installing Teams and running it natively on top of the IGEL Linux operating system, if that's what you're trying to accomplish.
That's right. Yeah, this is running locally. It could be a good backup option, right? So maybe somehow, I don't know, you access Teams generally through a virtual desktop, and somehow that's down or whatever. You could always run it locally, and this would be a way to do this. Assumes obviously the Teams is not down. But I've done this same process with Google Chrome. What else? Zoom, some of the other common packages that are up there on the GitHub site.
And Chris, that's a great example. Google Chromium is now built into the operating system. You don't have to do this anymore, but a year ago we did, right? Right.
Yeah. Obviously, Chrome, a popular browser, as a custom partition. Chromium now built in, so you may not need it such. One thing I noticed, I've got both. I've got Chrome and Chromium in use on my UD7 here. And I noticed the other day I was running Chrome and Google was telling me you don't have the latest version. So I connected with Ron. I said, I want to rebuild this, but I don't want to completely uninstall everything, because I had logged in with my Gmail account and all my settings were there. And all I had to do was build the latest version of Chrome, and then the INF file, all I did was just modify the version in that, which I don't know if Barry gets into that here, but once I deployed that, my device basically went through, and now it didn't erase all my settings. So my credentials that it had saved, it just updated Chrome to the next version. And when it restarted, I had everything left where I was. So you could do the same thing with Teams or Zoom just by modifying the INF file that gets created during this process. So if it's Zoom version 5.6. whatever, or Teams, whatever the versioning is, all you have to do is just modify that. And you'll see as you're going through this process, you'll see what version is getting installed. You just got to look at the script as it's going through on the Ubuntu box.
So before we move on, Harvey and Chris Feeney, it would be awesome if maybe we could put together a quarterly workshop where we just take an hour or two and build a package with people watching, just so we can answer real questions real time and show them firsthand how to do this. I would love it if you guys could.
Absolutely. Yeah, would love to do that. I mean, best way to do it is just to learn, trial and error. So yeah, let's get it on the schedule.
All right. So let's point to Seb here. I'm sorry, Harvey, do you have a comment?
No, just agreeing. I agree.
All right, Tag, you're it. Seb, let's walk through this process. Seb and Chris has already covered some of it, but walk us through this process that's been defined here about how to create the package using either the script or doing it manually here. Maybe this is both.
Sure. So basically, if you look at the structure of a custom partition, the custom partition itself, from my definition, is just a mount point where you can put some files that might be recoverable after a reboot. So if you store something in the operating system, like Chris already mentioned, it would be gone after a reboot. The custom/custom mount point is just a mount point that you can define where you can put some files. It could be videos, movies for your in-store TV, for advertisement systems or whatever. Mm-hmm. In our case, it's the custom partition. So let's go back to the main topic. The custom partition is a portable version of an application. In our specific need, we have to take the dependencies, so libraries that the application needs, and bring it back into the operating system. So that's the whole magic of a custom partition. Find dependencies needed by the application, by the binary, and bring them back into the operating system that the application find the files where it looks for. And that's the init script. And that's the, I would say, the most important part of the custom partition, because as soon as you created the archive where all the files are put together, you have to do some magic to bring them back into the operating system. This magic isn't copying files during boot time, because you would slow down your system a lot. If speaking about a bigger custom partition where you have a lot of dependencies, a lot of bigger libraries that need to deploy on every boot up, you just take some links, so symlinks, where you create a symbolic link between the original file and a target file into the operating system. So let's say under /custom Teams, you have a library under lib, and you want to have it under /lib in the real operating system. You would do a ln-s source target folder, and that just takes milliseconds instead of sometimes maybe some seconds if you want to copy a file. That's the first approach. The second thing, as soon as you create that init script, is if you want to do that in every boot up, you might also decrease the lifetime of your SSD, because you don't want to read and write stuff a couple of times on every boot up. If you're working in a normal office environment, that would at least be one shutdown and one boot up every day. Yeah. So that's what we are doing when speaking about the init script. So coming back to the main topic and this building script that Ron created.
Seb, before you go there and what you were just talking about, are custom partitions read-only, or are they read-write, or is that adjustable?
They are in general read-write, because everything that is related to logs or something like that might be redirected into this /custom. So in general, it's read and write.
Okay. Is there a way to make them read only if you're, uber security conscious?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Even if it's not that often recommended, because you have to think about the structure of a custom partition. This custom partition is in general one in file and an archive. and this archive needs to be deployed to the to your endpoint and extracted there. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to make it read only, in my opinion, but you could, yes.
Yeah. And one other thing to point out about what's been documented here, there's a lot of like basic Linux, Unix concepts here around changing directories and making scripts executable, which they aren't by default. If you're new to the Linux world, there's good stuff in this document just for getting you comfortable with the idea of how to move around within Bash or Korn or whatever shell it is you're using. In this case, Bash. So really good stuff here, and the authors of this document should be commended for making the basic steps and adding pictures along the way. Pictures go a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does a really nice job. I think, I was looking at this, so at this point, we established that you should have a build box in Ubuntu 18.04 version. Then you should, from that build box, go to the GitHub site to be able to access that script if you want to use that to build this thing.
Hey, Chris, real quick, when you say build box and you talk about Ubuntu, yes, but you can, IGEL, right? You can use the appropriate version of IGEL will get this done. You don't have to build a native Ubuntu box, or do you?
You could. I think, preference would be, Ubuntu, because you're not dealing with, we have instructions, I think, out there on the KB on how to use IGEL OS as a build box. But I think because you're also downloading these other libraries, as Seb was referring to, that you would need the application to run correctly. Yeah. Just have an Ubuntu box that you can kind of build, get it prepped, and then use that. Now, best practice, have your template basically built, and then after you build teams like we're doing here, once you finish that, just revert back to your snapshot of clean. So don't continue to build custom partitions one after another without reverting back to that original snapshot, because you might be pulling libraries or other things that may not be needed or whatever. Just, always start with a clean build box.
Yeah, that's really good. See, I made the assumption you were using an IGEL box, and that's what you guys are referring to. But it makes sense. You're looking for the native OS libraries, and that's going to be in Ubuntu, not necessarily in IGEL, because IGEL cleans up stuff it doesn't need. Go ahead.
Right.
I just wanted to add the main reasons that we are not using a package manager on our operating system. So something like apt or dpackage isn't available in general. So if you want to install or to download an additional library from a package manager, it will not just be available, because this main tool isn't available in general in operating system. Because from a security perspective, we do not want people to install through apt whatever they like into our operating system, even if it would make sense maybe in the near future to have that in a secured sandbox. But at the moment, we don't have that kind of package manager. So that's the reason why we have to build it inside of an Ubuntu system, where you can do whatever you like and find, like, if we come back to the script that Ron wrote, curl and unzip are both in our operating system, so there we are good. But if you go a little bit deeper into the script, and I don't have the script in front of me, but I just remember there is one dependency regarding some keyring. And if you want to install that, you could, in theory, download it by hand from the package maintainer, extract it on your machine, and transfer it to the endpoint, but it doesn't make sense. And that's the reason why, just to come back to what Chris said, building an 18.04 Ubuntu machine with, if you can, with a similar or near kernel version about what we are using in our operating system, then you are to 99% sure that everything will work like expected.
Yeah. Yep. And as you guys have said over and over again, test, look for anomalies. So Harvey Green, before we jump into actually the script process here, have you had much opportunity to build custom partitions, and what have you found along the way when you were doing it?
I've had a few opportunities to do it. It can be, as they're kind of going through and describing now, it can be hairy if you're not starting from an Ubuntu build box. It does make the most sense to go that way, even from a realistic perspective. So I would definitely recommend that method. It is the easiest way to get you from where you are to where you want to be, and in a way that is going to be the most secure and stop you from pulling your hair out.
So guys, how do we want to walk through this process on the remainder of time we have left, so that people that are listening and not looking at the screen can understand what the steps are?
Chris, would you agree to go through the script in a few steps? Just describe the main steps.
Yeah, I had the script up on the left-hand side. So if somebody wants to actually see what this automated script is doing, you kind of made reference to a couple things, right? But in the blog itself, he kind of preps it ready, and then he gets it and he runs the script, and he puts a timer on there to see how fast does it build. That's actually a cool little thing that Ron showed in his initial LinkedIn video. He was able to build this in 42 seconds. I believe Barry came in at 39 seconds. So very impressive. But maybe start there perhaps, and then continue on. What do you want?
Well, is it as simple as getting the build libraries downloaded, getting the script on your machine, getting the script executable, running the script and pointing it to the build library, and voila, out comes a custom partition?
You don't even have to pull the libraries down. You just point at the script that Ron's created, and it goes out and finds everything you need, pulls it down, and then builds it. So.
And then what do we have after that? We have the XMLs and the profile that we need to then check into our UMS and make available to our devices, right?
Yeah. So on the screen there, Seb, can you see that?
Yep.
Sort of what? Yeah. So if you see, he lists out what was created there. Maybe talk to each of those things.
Sure. So what we have in that window is that we have the shell script itself. So as soon as you start it, everything is good. And then you have the profiles. The profiles are pulled from the GitHub too. So the profiles are more or less the main location and behavior that your endpoint will get. As soon as you deploy the profile, you are not deploying the custom partition by assigning the custom partition to the endpoint, you are taking the profiles. And inside of the profile that Ron already created, you import them into the UMS, adapt a few things like the download folder, where to get the file from, in our case, from the Amazon S3 storage, and the endpoint will retrieve that file from the main web or FTP or SFTP host. So that's the whole magic. What this profile is doing, it's creating the mount point, it's delivering information where to get the file from, and nothing more. All the magic is then done by the script inside of the tar.bz2 file. So if you look at the screenshot, you see this teams.tar.bz2 file. That's the biggest file because it's an archive, and inside of that archive we have all our dependencies, we have our binary, etc., and also our init script, which then creates the whole symbolic link magic inside of the operating system. In our case, the Teams custom partition is a really nice one because it's extremely powerful, but not extremely complicated. You don't have to create some system daemons, something like that. It's more or less everything inside of itself, inside of the dep package that Ron is downloading inside of the script. So that's the second part. So first, you import the XML file, so teams profile.xml into your UMS, and you can just go a little bit downside the website, the blog and article. So after importing, yeah.
One point I was going to bring up, what Ron has actually done after the build is done, there's actually two profiles, and you might see this with other custom partitions depending on what the app is. One is no persistency. So basically, let's say you're on a kiosk machine and you need somebody to use Teams, and then they're done and then they walk away, or they clear it out. So it doesn't actually persist with those additional like login credentials. Whereas on my UD7, I'm the only one that uses it. I'd like it to kind of, keep some of those settings after I initially log in. And so that there's two options there. I've seen the same thing with my Google Chrome. You have, my initial profile that I used, it didn't save my Gmail settings, right? So when I rebooted, I was back to having to log into Chrome. I now use a profile where it saves that. Basically, it saves it in custom, so it remains on a reboot. So those are some options you might see depending on that.
And so, guys, what we've done here is we've brought the profile in via the XML, and now we're going to put that larger file that was created out on some type of shared storage that's internet accessible, so that our users can download it without having to pull through the IGEL gateway to do so, right?
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guys, help me out. And for those of you listening, we are going to also have the video of this available, and you can certainly just go to the IGEL community and get the blog and see all this. So we have the firmware customizations and then custom partition. And then at what point do I define this particular partition, or is it just a general, it's part of this profile, right? This profile will only have one custom partition in it?
Yeah. That's the in file that we are referencing in the URL you're looking at. So the in file is referring to the tar.bz2 file. So the in file isn't a big file and isn't containing a lot of information, but enough to give the operating system the information, which version, which kind of application you want to download, etc., etc. So that's exactly this teams.in file, which is not that important if you look about the content, because it's just a normal text file with a few information, but it gives all the needed information to the operating system about what he has to achieve.
Yeah. And in file is translated to .inf. It took me a second to figure out what you meant by that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
So a couple of things. I actually have the INF on the screen here, and I'll just, it's very small. It's like maybe 6-7 lines. One of the things that if you're going to go and
share your screen.
Yeah, no problem. Give me a second. We are using videos, so you need to give me the ability to do that.
Hold on, it's coming. All right, see if you can do it now.
Perfect. All right. So what you see on the screen here is essentially the INF. Not much here. So there's that Teams BZ2 file. This version info, this is what I want to point out. So this will be interesting, right? As you go about, maybe you want to update to maybe a newer version, and you find out that instead of 1.3, it's now 1.4. After you build this, you could basically take the original INF, just modify this version with the newer version, 1. whatever, and then you would still point them at the new BZ2 that was created, but just by modifying that and then going into your actual profile, the profile will basically have an option there under the download. Do you want to have it auto update? And if you check that box, which it may or may not be on by default, then when you deploy the new updated version of the profile and the device sees that, there's a new version out there, then you'll notice that it'll start automatically downloading that custom partition, updating it to the newer version of fill in the blank app. In this case, Teams, could be Chrome or something else. And then it'll either reboot or finish, and then you're ready to go. So just a little trick there. If you are getting familiar with it, certainly something to play around with and try that out. So that's what we're talking about here.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start heading towards the finish line here. Now we've got the profile imported. We've got internet accessible access to the custom partition, which is, I guess, in this section here where we actually point to the URL, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Just a short note on that one. If you take this URL, sometimes you want to build it by your own, or you're using an FTP or whatever server. Just take the whole URL and copy and paste it into a web browser and check if you can access the teams.inf file without any kind of issues. If you're getting a username and password prompt, just check your credentials and put that into the profile, because you have to think about the fact that the endpoint will try to download the stuff from your public server. And if you entered an authentication method there, you will have to cover it here too. So you can put that into the profile. And the easiest way to check if it works or not is just to copy and paste that URL into a web browser to check if, yeah, your access rights are right, or if you have any kind of network issues sometimes because you're using internal CNAME or whatever. So that's just one thing that I wanted to share.
Well, that advice is worth $1 million, and anybody who doesn't already know that, that's great advice. If you can't access it through a browser, then you can't access it, and until you fix that, you're troubleshooting the wrong stuff.
Yeah, since you've got on the screen, there's that automatic update setting there right above the URL where, like I said, if you modify that INF and you just update that, just check that box, click OK, and then push it out, and then you can update. You know, if you started with version of Teams and you want to go to the next version, that's what it is right there.
Okay. And then in the write-up here, there's a video that kind of shows what the end result should look like. It looks like they're running that inside a VirtualBox or something, which is another great piece of advice. If you're an IGEL administrator, any type of administrator, you know, VirtualBox or VMware Workstation is your friend because of the snapshot capabilities. I'm sure you guys are all old enough to remember hours and hours and hours of installing operating systems on computers just so you could break it and try again. I've been up all night multiple times in my life.
Good times.
Now that we can,
and if you want an NFL license for an OS 11 virtual machine, just go to IGEL Community and to the Community -NFL section. There we have an OS 11 with Workspace Edition and EMP valid for up to 3 years, if I remember right, for one specific MAC address. So just in case you want to test something for your own.
Oh, that's great. That's great information too. Well, guys, I think we've reached the end of this. I think we've covered it well enough, audio, and people will also have access to the video. We'll figure out a way to get that available. And then what I would encourage you three guys to do, maybe once a quarter, just pick an app and create a custom partition and let people watch and ask questions. I think that would be extremely valuable to XenTegra customers, the community at large, and just people who are interested in Linux. Probably a ton of value in that. That'd be awesome.
Yep, no problem. Definitely.
That's the challenge.
All right. Harvey, I'll see you tomorrow, perhaps. Are you going to be at the office?
I will not, but if you're going to be there, then maybe I'll make something happen.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah, Harvey, Chris and I are meeting in the morning. You should come.
Okay. Bring a Raspberry Pi. We're going to figure out how to break it. So.
Yeah.
Send it to me. I will break it for sure.
Guys, that's it. Seb, I appreciate you making the effort to join us from the car. Now, I got a question for you. Are you close enough to your house that you're on the Wi-Fi, or are you actually having to use a mobile network?
Tethering, so last one.
Yeah, well, it did pretty well, so they're very impressive. I don't know how I'm going to do all this when I start traveling again and get out of my office here, but we'll find a way, and we'll make it happen. It's good to know you can do it on a mobile network, and it worked out pretty good.
Cool.
Well, guys, thanks for joining this week, and we'll do another one next week. As always, thanks for the time.
All right, take
care. It was a pleasure.